This is the Beyond the Dojo podcast. Again, I'm Lauren.
I'm Jerron.
And we're trying to be more consistent. We went to Florida Winter Keiko the other day, and all these people are like, well, a bunch of people that you may be one of those people who are watching right now.
Well, it was like one or two.
It was a couple people.
It was one or two.
It's more than zero. Came up to us and was like, called us by name, and we're like, hi. But they're like, how often do you do your thing? Broadcast, whatever this is.
Podcast.
Yeah, but that's what somebody said, broadcast to me.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like,
Not often enough.
We do it sometimes. So, yeah, we went to Florida Winter Keiko a couple weeks ago.
Right. Mm-hmm. You can see the notoriety went to one of our heads.
Oh, I didn't really think it was that great. I was just like, oh, you listen to that? Ish, sorry. So, yeah.
It was awkward for me. I'm always awkward when anything like that happens. I'm like,
Hi.
Oh my God, that's weird. So,
yeah. So we got to train a little bit.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
Good people, good times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good training.
Straight up. I think I hurt my knee. So that's a injury that hasn't appeared in about 5 years. So, yay.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot of throwing on the sand, to be honest.
Oh, yeah. I got thrown. I got kneed in the head. I got my bell rung one time. That was cool. I almost kicked a couple guys in the crotch. I'm very sorry. You know who you are? And
people keep on asking me why I don't sand train.
Why you don't train on the beach. Is
what
they don't ask you why you don't sand train. They ask you why you don't train on the beach. Because to you it's sand training.
That's what it is to me, because this is
Desert.
sand. It's everybody goes, oh, it's the sand. We're going to throw each other. We're going to do all these things. We're going to kick at each other.
It's the beach. It's so cool. And it's the water. And it's Florida. And it's morning time.
And the way to appreciate that, the way to appreciate that is to sit in a lounge chair or on the towel and enjoy it. Take it in. Take it in. You know what I mean? You don't got to train on it.
Mental training, like meditation training. That's the type of beach training we do.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Awesome.
Close the eyes, get sunburn training.
Yeah, like that. Except that we're from Florida and we wear sunscreen. So don't get that burnt. So today we wanted to talk about a subject that I actually think I wrote down on our list a couple months ago. And the way that this came up, I was teaching one of our teens and adults classes, and we were doing Kion Kumite. And the past few times that we've done it, we've taken a lot of time to kind of break down and explain why, number one, we do Kion Kumite, but then also why there are certain aspects of it that are like so basic. Now, keep in mind that with our dojo, we try to take a more application-based approach in how we teach, so we use that in order to explain techniques sometimes, often actually, and then we'll also, especially in our teens and adults class, take like the last few minutes on about 75% of the classes or maybe 50% of classes, and give them a chance to work on some application type stuff, like actually get their creative juices flowing and learning how to use some of the movements from kata in particular. So that's what they're used to seeing. So then when we put them into Kion Kumite, they're just like, what is this? So I gave a little speech there, and I know that you kind of followed up on it as well, explaining like why it is important in like 5-step Kion Kumite, like you'd see on early Q exams, why you should be pulling your draw hand back whenever you're doing a counter punch.
Or pulling the blocking hand back when you do the counter punch. Right.
Yeah. And why we are following a basic pattern, like whenever you step in and punch, you're in that system, you don't punch and then step. Even though the person is vulnerable right at the beginning, you're not going to punch them with their face really close to you and then both of you try to step in. Like, that's sparring. Instead, you would actually hold that punch until toward the end of the step, just like you would in fundamental training. So we want to basically talk about the importance of fundamentals, essentially. So just kind of those couple of topics. Do you want to maybe share some of what we talked about with the students?
Oh, with the Kion Kumite?
With any of those or anything else.
Well, the beautiful thing about Kion Kumite and even the progressions, you know, the 5-step, 3-step, 1-step, semi-free into sparring, is it teaches you things that are abstract in a sense, like timing and distance and getting to understand when you should be able to block someone, when you shouldn't be able to, when you're in danger, when you're not, being able to create that safety distance for yourself. A lot of these things, you know, will be learned if you just free spar all the time, but you'll get hit a lot. You get punched in the face a lot. It's a tougher lesson. I think doing it the way traditional JKA clubs do and just traditional Shotokan clubs do where it breaks it from a 5-step, 3-step, you know, 1-steps, free, you know, semi-free and all that, is that those abstract concepts are so easily taught in those scenarios.
Right.
Because everything is so formal and so, like, it's all predetermined. It's all...
Everything's controlled.
Controlled, right? The only thing that you have in control is your timing and distance.
Right.
And that's kind of what you want to focus on in that scenario.
And I think it also provides opportunity if we're going to be a super technical art. It gives you the chance to take all of the technical kihon that you've been doing, which I'm sure we'll talk about here as well, and apply it in a more application-based, somewhat more application-based scenario rather than just doing it at the air.
Yeah. Well, even when you start talking about application, you know, timing, distance is essential for it to work, you know, and you want to be someone who has a breadth of knowledge in that sense. You know what I mean? Like, you want to be able to apply your timing and distance in different scenarios against different attacks. And you don't become this one technique kind of person. You know, what happens in application is that people, they respond to almost every attack with the same response. You know, they'll block one way and punch one way, and that's it.
Okay.
You know, and when you have different timing and different distance, it allows you to experiment safely with different ideas and be able to be, okay, this works or that works, and understanding that kind of thing, understanding short distance techniques, mid-range techniques, long distance techniques. That becomes from the very fundamental movements you do with Kihon Kumite.
Right, and I think what's super important to recognize here is, like, the reason that Kihon Kumite was even developed is it's because it's just a stepping stone that can be progressed gradually, like, you know, cutting away at some of the rigidity of it. You know, you can go from 5 steps. Some people do, we just started doing 3-step in our dojo. You know, 1 step's still Kihon Kumite. Blocking and going different directions. Like, you're adding extra elements that make it a little bit harder to control the further along you go. But it is important, like, as an instructor, to make that progression. Because I have been in training scenarios where that is not what happened, where we just stuck with the same fundamental Kihon Kumite idea forever. And then all of a sudden, by black belt level, you're expected to be able to spar. And it's like, I can't spar. I can barely do regular, just, like, basic punch and somebody blocks and counters.
Well, I would dare to say that anybody that starts free sparring, no matter how much experience they have in basic kumite or not, still feels kind of lost for a period.
Sure.
Like,
but I think I would argue that with every step. If you're going to be arguing progressions, I think once you make big steps like that, it does feel like that.
Okay. So.
Like, even, like if you go from 3 or 5 step and drop it down to 1 step, just Kihon Kumite.
Kihon Kumite by itself, once you get the premise, it's pretty simple.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unless you start, and it becomes, that's why I think that there's that area in Kihon Kumite where you start adding angles and different steps and different shifting and stuff, where it becomes a little bit more difficult, but the structure allows you to figure that out relatively quickly. I mean, if you're doing like stepping backward, stepping into like a 45-degree angle or a diagonal to the attack within a class period, generally most people get it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or if you're switching feet to step back or whatever you're doing, within a class or two, people pick it up pretty easy. But when you go from, let's say, Kihon Kumite to semi-free or I don't know what it's called again. I forgot the Japanese name.
Jyo Kumite?
Juipon Kumite.
Oh, okay.
Where it's just a one-step thing. And you're a little bit more free. You don't really know when the person's coming. That is awkward. And then going from there to free sparring is completely...
Yeah, to having no clue what they're going to throw at you.
Right. It's the progression has to be, like you said, the progression has to be there to have a sense of safety, that it's not such a big jump. But, you know, every step has that awkwardness.
So this is just a side note, and this is not throwing shade at by any means, because I know how I would react. I was watching a video of an instructor the other day, and you can tell, like, when an instructor is giving a point in front of a class and they have an uke there, they ask the uke to do a specific technique, and they do something different than what's asked of them, and the instructor sometimes can't adapt to what the person does. I watched someone who was able to adapt and someone else who wasn't able to. But you think about, like, that's a very controlled situation, but they did something other than what they were asked to do. So then taking that and amplifying it times, like, however many techniques in a sparring scenario where you're moving around, like, yeah, that's very, very stressful.
Yeah, somewhat.
Well, look, you've been sparring longer than I have, so.
It's not this experience thing. I think it's just some people just, it could be the generation I grew up where we did a lot of wrestling and play fighting as children. Yeah. And that was just kind of normal. So when we sparred, it was like, oh, cool, we actually get to hit harder and, actually throw punches. And, it was just a natural progression. I mean, I remember playing in the hay barn, WWE wrestling, jumping off freaking, like, 2 stories. Jumping off hay bales and, like, Superfly snooking people and doing all these crazy things and just loving it because we thought we were safe because we were on hay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was just like,
give him the chair.
It was literally, that's how I grew up. So when spar came around, it was like, oh yeah, it's normal.
Yeah.
But to compare it to today's generation or kids are coming up where they're doing majority of it's like either they're playing video games or organized sports or they have some rough playing, but it's not like encouraged or even tolerated. I could see where it's a shock.
Yeah. So some of the other things we talked about in that conversation was, let's talk about, like, we'll kind of work our way backwards here. So talking about, like, pulling hand. So that was a class that I was teaching, but I know that you talk about the pulling hand a lot. So you do want to talk about, like, the importance of actually using that pulling hand if we're talking about Kihon Kumite.
In Kihon Kumite, it's a form strict thing. You're learning to block and then just have the pattern of pulling the hand back to the hip as you're countering or doing something else. It is to get the pattern down. Does that make sense? To kind of teach yourself to block and move your hand. And then eventually it progresses to literally grabbing something and pulling it, right? But to just leave your hand there in connection to the technique or the attack is a horrible idea. Absolutely horrible idea. For one, who says the attacker wouldn't grab your hand?
Right.
2, you're missing the opportunity to be in control.
Right.
Because if you were to block the technique and be able to use a pulling hand technique where you either control that limb or you control the person from there, then that's great. But if you're not doing either one of those, then you really got to reconsider what you're doing there.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to hold a static position. You would have some kind of movement forward or backward after that with that arm.
Either clear the attack and control with the hand, either just like clearing it, pushing with your hand, or literally pulling it to your hip is the idea behind that.
Right.
Even with basic blocks, the idea is to make the block, then control it. That's just the way it is.
Right.
Now, doing sparring or something else where you're just blocking to hit back, that's because sparring dictates that.
Right.
Those are the rules. You can't do joint locks. You can't take people down like that. So you have to respect the rules. But if you're looking at it more of application based, you should have the habit of blocking and controlling or blocking and deflecting. And just to leave your hand there is not the best idea.
Now, we say that as an explanation, but obviously when you're doing it and it's actually Kihon Kumite, you block, you pull your hand back and punch, and their arm is still there floating above your head or wherever. So it feels like you're doing something dumb. Right.
But that's where, as teachers, we have to reiterate the fact that this is a fundamental drill. These are the principles we're teaching, timing and distance.
Yeah.
We're trying to get you comfortable with getting punched at. It's all part of it. It's not application based.
Right.
If it was application based in the sense that we're going to do this self-defense move, we probably wouldn't do the exact moves.
Yeah, we wouldn't do it in this way. And then the other thing is, like,
or the form.
There is a part of that form that's applicable though. I mean, like you're doing a bunch of pieces of that movement that feel really weird in the drill, but there are lots of aspects of that that are usable. Even just the fact that you're in a front stance and that you're not standing straight up. You know, one of the things that blew my mind the first time I ever saw Steve Ubel is like he shows how you're using your stance to actually attack your opponent. I was making the argument the other day that I feel like, you know, he's a tall person and he often demonstrates against really big people. But I think if he was a small person, he would probably still demonstrate against big people, but he can use his knees and stuff to knock people down and basically get people down to size. And I think that's what karate is designed to do, is it's designed for us to be able to use our stance to our advantage. But I think unless you are training that in a basic sense, so that's another aspect of it, I feel like the form matters and we're still using that basic form for Kyoto Kumite.
Absolutely. And it's, once again, it's an abstract drill.
Well,
it's a fundamental drill
that's turned into something more concrete. Yeah.
That eventually progresses to more concrete stuff, right? But people sometimes get stuck that the drill is the concrete, is the realistic thing. They think, oh, this is the way we're going to fight. And it's like, have you ever seen a fight in your life? There's no fight that ever people like block with rising block and get in a front stance and have that distance, have that real formal distance. It doesn't work that way. You know, I try to reiterate to our students that, hey, this is an abstract drill.
So I had somebody bring this up the other day, that subject, and they were saying, you know, I don't know if they were necessarily expressing concern, but I could see this from a concerned perspective. Like, my kid is learning karate and I don't want them to think that they can just go fight somebody. But they should be able to fight somebody. You know, they're not a black belt. This kid is still a Q rank, but he should have some semblance of being able to take care of himself if push came to shove. So, you know, the explanation that I gave was like, you know, we're building on these concepts and we're trying to not introduce too advanced of like sparring ideas too early, and yet we are also trying to introduce application-based ideas early so that they can use some of it. So what kind of response do you think you would have given in that case? You understand what I'm saying?
Oh, I know what you're saying.
Okay.
And not to like follow the suit of like this idea that we're introducing it, I would be honest with them and said, your child has to grow up and be mature, more mature in the idea of violence.
Yeah.
You know, just punching and kicking someone.
The student is like 8, by the way.
So at 8 years old, punching and kicking someone or pushing someone back, that might be enough for them to handle themselves.
Right. And that's a good understanding of distance.
Right. And that's just you know, playing, like we said, getting used to get punched and kicked at, learning how to block at the right time, having good distance, having good timing. That stuff is essential at that level. You know, but if they're going to imply that we need to teach them like takedowns and these, you know, chokeholds and everything else.
That wasn't being implied at that point, but yeah.
Right. Then they need to be more mature in violence. They have to understand that what we're showing them is not just going to hurt the person, but could possibly maim them.
Yeah.
You know, you do it hard enough, you break the elbow, that person doesn't have full range in their elbow for the rest of their life. Do you want to be responsible for that? Or because he called you, you know, bubblehead or poopy pants, poopy pants or needle nose or something, like something stupid, right? Well, let's be real, because that's just, now I feel like an idiot. I feel like a
That's
bubblehead.
a great one. I'm going to call see, I would call some of our students that. Bubblehead.
So it's one of those things where it's just like, you got to make sure they're mature enough to handle the things you're giving them, because you know, and if done correctly with the right intent, it's going to maim, not just hurt. You know, simple blocks can easily blow someone's elbow out. Simple blocks can dislocate a strike, can dislocate a jaw. You know, there's a lot of things that we think is very simple and very everyday, that in reality, with the right intent, with the right angst behind it, can cause some serious damage. And we don't respect it enough as a culture, as karate people, to think and respect them, even the minimal.
Right.
You know, the minimal level stuff, you know, the fundamental stuff is effective.
But I think that goes back to having a good understanding of those basics and of those fundamentals, because this particular student probably does not have the proper like drive behind the techniques to make it effective.
Yeah.
Could, but doesn't apply himself to practice it in class. So I don't know if in a self-defense scenario that would actually work out.
But if he knows how to make a fist,
sure,
he knows how to throw it.
Right.
It doesn't have to be perfect, and it can still cause damage.
Right.
Because right angle, just the luck of the shot, it works. As karateka, we want to be effective every time, and our goal is to become that.
Right.
But you have to understand at what rank do you have that 2 out of 10 effectiveness, where 2 out of 10 punches could literally maim somebody. A lot of that is, everybody's seen fights and seen them, and even MMA, where the guy like just is off balance and happens to catch the dude like with a punch, knocks the other dude out. Right? There's no technique or proper drive behind it. It just hit him at the right time. It hit him in the right spot, and it's effective. Now, would that happen 10 out of 10 times? No, it wouldn't.
Right.
So,
and I think too, like, basic fundamental karate does not look like MMA. It doesn't look like boxing. It looks very, very different. And I think from maybe a parent's perspective, so I think sometimes they look at what we're doing and they're just like I feel this. Sometimes I bring this up, I make this up in my head and people are not actually thinking this, but sometimes it is being thought. Parents look at what we're doing and they're just like, like, what is that? Like, they're like, that doesn't look like what I think it's supposed to look like, so I don't think it's going to be effective. But to be honest with you, your child learning any kind of, we're talking from a kid's perspective because this is usually where this comes up, even though we did have this discussion with our teens and adults, but even from like a parent looking at their child, you have your kid in a martial art. Like, they're learning effective techniques. We are teaching them a progression, and they are going to continue to progress as long as they continue to train with us. Right. So they are already a leg up over another kid who maybe gets bullied at school and they have to try to figure out how to fight back, or, God forbid, gets attacked by an adult. I say that too, like, we had another situation where a student who was excellent but is very young and is in a class that's oriented toward young kids, which means that they're not doing a ton of application-based stuff, was pulled from the dojo because of that, because what we were doing didn't look like what the parent felt would be effective martial arts. And it's like, I get that you have an idea in your mind of what martial arts are supposed to look like, but literally, like, have you watched The Karate Kid? Okay, he had him like standing floors and stuff, and then he was a karate master. I am kidding, but seriously though, like, there's a fundamental idea there being taught, and we are trying to orient it toward age groups, but we're also building on top of those ideas. So I don't know, this part of this topic kind of came out of some frustration with not the previous parent, but this one, knowing that, like, hey, what we're teaching is effective, but your kid is down here. They're not up here yet. They haven't learned all there is to learn. There's still a lot of fundamental concepts they still have to learn before we can get them to that point, but they do have enough to do something. So
it goes back to like what we said before. We teach kids karate. When we get a child student in the dojo floor, we usually get two. We get the student, and then we get the student's parent.
Mm-hmm. And you spend some time educating them also, because they think what they see in movies and what they watch whatever person do, they think that that's what all karate is. And then, we're like, no, that's not what it is. Or they watch MMA and they're like, those guys are just punching at each other all the time. It's like, have you noticed they're adults in that training facility? And do you notice how many times they miss? Not trying to say I want to fight an MMA guy, but I'm just saying.
Right. Well, it's even, you know how many hours of training they put in?
Right.
Fighting other people to figure out how to do that. So if you want your child to have that same experience, you know how many fights your kid would have to be in before they even have that hardened idea? And then do you want your child to have that kind of view on violence?
And
that it's so normal
right.
that it's not good unless I hurt or maim the person.
And it's not to say that MMA is in any way a bad thing, but they're training for something very specific. Right. Karate is a little bit more, well-rounded. Yeah, I mean, it's got more to it. It's important that the martial part is not neglected, but there's a lot there. And like, still going back to that idea that Shotokan karate in particular, and I can't speak for other karate styles because God knows I don't know what American Open style is teaching, but Shotokan karate at least has fundamental principles that are your mechanical principles that you're learning from a white belt, and then you're gradually progressing them. Okay, so this goes back to what we talked about earlier with the teens and adults class. We talked about don't punch and then step. Okay, had to explain to them like there is a mechanical idea behind when you are supposed to punch, and we actually worked on this literally the other night. We worked on step and punch with our teens and adults for an hour, and like they were cool with it. We worked with a lot of different drills on step and punch, but we were literally working on the timing of it, the basic mechanics of it. But they understand now from that class and from some previous classes like why that's important. It's not because in a sparring scenario you're going to step in and then punch at the end. It's just that there is a more optimal, we're going to lose our camera in a second, there's a more optimal way to do a punch, and we're trying to learn that. And then so it's like what I said to them is you pick a target and you learn to shoot at that target. If you can't hit that target, you probably can't hit any other target. So let's just aim at this one target. And if you get that one down, then we can add in other targets. So if you can do one basic timing and you can get that one down, then we can start trying other things and seeing if you can do those as well.
Yeah, I think it also comes back to like, as teachers, we're skilled enough to show them the difference of a poorly timed punch and a well-timed punch. And they see or even feel the impact and know the difference. They could hear it when we hit pads.
Yeah.
Which
is cool.
That part of it makes it easier for them to go, oh wow, I got to spend time on it, right? And that's because you and I spend a lot of time. If you've been watching or listening to our podcast, we talk about the most basic things that we train on. What do we work on every week? We work on this kata, or we work on hand and foot timing, or this and that timing. And it's like this really simple concepts that some people think we're wasting our time, but in reality to us, we've been shown there's a difference there.
Yeah.
And it's worth it.
Yeah.
Right? So to master the fundamentals means that everything beyond that becomes so much easier to master because you have a base of ability.
Right.
Not just understanding, but ability to do it. That now you can change it and manipulate it the way you want, when you want, and how you want.
Right.
But some people lose that concept and say, "Oh, I just could do it several different ways," and that's great and all.
It's fine. We can just keep talking. Battery died.
Okay, so it's great and all, but at the same time, depth of knowledge is always going to be more valuable than breadth of knowledge.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have depth of the fundamentals, how well do you understand the breadth of it? How to understand how
to apply it.
How it applies so many different ways.
Yeah.
If you can't do one simple thing.
Yeah. Well, at one point I heard Steve will say that there are your fundamentals change. What is fundamental to a white belt is not what is fundamental to a higher Q rank or to a Shodan or to a Nidan. Like you have different fundamentals that you're working on.
Right.
So, accept that you are where you are and you need to master this particular set of fundamentals before you move on to something else. Like it's still maybe fundamental to that rank, but you also have to be self-aware enough to know where you actually are. And people fancy themselves to be better than they are. Sorry, I've been there. I've done the same thing. Jeremiah's done the same thing. We know plenty of people who do that all the time. We tend to think that we're better than we are. Honestly, like there are some basic fundamental things that we still have to work on. There are fundamental things that I probably should have had down by now that I don't have down by the rank that I'm at.
Absolutely.
So,
you sure do.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks a lot.
No, like you said, we both have these. We all have our unique issues, right? We all have our own limitations.
But you have to accept that. Like, don't think that you can just do everything. Like, start with something basic and be good at it. Be humble.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny. And Florida Winter Kick host Scott Langley Sensei said something that just made a lot of sense. He goes, Rick Houghton talks about all these things and all these advanced ideas, and just a little squimish here or wiggle there, and no big deal. But he goes, and people at that level fail to remind everybody how much they do kata every day, how much calisthenics they do every day, how much stretching they do every day. All these basic things that we consider to be basic, they do every day, and just know and think that everybody else does it too. And I think that was a wise word, because it reminds us that, this is really advanced stuff, but that's not the majority of their practice.
Right. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff.
Right. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that people don't recognize as like normal practice. Fundamentals is normal practice. The advanced, super like abstract ideas or super technical things are literally maybe 20% of the practice, right?
I would say that that's a bit of a stretch. I would say it's less than that, but it's not that you shouldn't practice those things ever. It's just that what bearing does it have on the overall quality of your karate if your fundamentals suck?
Right. And I think that's kind of where it comes down with the conversation of fundamentals. Like, how much do you value how much do you value the fundamental, truth of karate, the fundamental truths of movement? How much do you value that?
Right.
Is going to be reflected in what your karate looks like.
Yeah.
And
yeah, definitely.
Right. And into the trained eye or people who've been training 15, 20, 30 years, they're going to be able to see that. Right. So it's like, honestly, it's not to be rude, but when some people are like, oh yeah, that's really easy, I got that, and you watch them and you're like, oh,
you do not got that.
Right. But
it's got you.
But you understand where they're at in their path, right? You almost immediately go, oh, okay, I was there. I remember what that felt like. And then you remember like the epiphany, those moments of clarity, and that either that combo, kata, whatever, where you said, oh, it's this, and it's that. And you kind of want to encourage them to try different things. And some people get it and they try, and then some people don't get it and think that you're telling them what to do when they already got something. So it goes back to that, what's that concept, that top of Mount Stupid?
Oh, yeah. The Dunning-Kruger effect.
Dunning-Kruger effect, where it's like, oh, I can't tell you anything yet. You're not off the top of the mountain yet.
I think if you look at just the first idea from the Dojo Kun, like seek perfection of character or strive for the perfection of character, I don't think, if you look at that in context, like it's not just, oh, I just want to be a better person. It's also like, do you have humble character traits? Do you have the self-awareness to be able to say, hey, I'm actually not up here at this more advanced level. I'm actually down here at this basic level. And then can you take that self-awareness and apply it to your training? That to me is an idea of seeking perfection of character. Because even though now it's applied to your physicality, it started from a mental and more spiritual practice, like actually being honest with yourself. And I think a lot of times we are not honest with ourselves.
I think that's where the separation comes in your path. After a certain point in your training, where your main influence is the sensei, you start to train on your own and try to figure things out. Right? Karate has an amazing way of humbling yourself. Because you might feel like, oh, I got that move. I did it. I got it. And if you it could be as simple as videotape yourself or video yourself and watch it, and then you realize you're not doing what you think you're doing, right? And then you have to be humbled because you go, there's no one else telling me that. I can see it for myself, right? And some of the guys that are the most advanced in what they do are some of the most humble people I've ever met.
Yeah, definitely.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's almost as if their humility is a result of their training, of their practice.
I would definitely say
you know what I'm saying?
Is,
like, because they realized a long time ago that no one's ever going to get it 100%. No one's going to be perfect. You could strive to be that way, but it's not going to happen. There's always going to be room for improvement.
Sure.
Right? And it's just one of those ideas that if you look at some of the people you admire, and you will know You know, you'll see it. You'll be like, oh, this guy's really humble, and he understands that everybody struggles, right? And everybody's trying to get to that next thing and trying to do it. Mm-hmm. But, you know, there's going to be people that are in their path where humility hasn't entered yet.
And I think there's also like a stoicism that you develop with your karate as well, because early on you're just really excited, and you really just want to learn new stuff, and you're like, why do I have to do this basic thing? I want to punch this person who's in front of me in 5-step Kihon Kumite. I just want to hit him. And it's like I get that you want to do that, but let's start here, you know, and sometimes you have to rein that in, which kind of sucks, because I mean, people are excited and they want to get all the knowledge they can, but sometimes it's like, okay, but if you learn this too early, your understanding of it could be totally skewed because you don't really understand the basic ideas underneath it, you know? Yeah. So it sucks, but whenever you learn anything new, that's kind of how it is like, you know, you might be really excited at first, but if you don't get the basics down, you know, trying to learn the piano, you can try to learn some of these like super high level pieces, but if you can't even put your fingers on the keys in the proper position and move them around and stretch them out and whatever, obviously I'm not a pianist, but if you can't do the basics, how the heck are you going to do the other? Yeah. Not even to mention musicality and all these other stuff. I've been watching a lot of two-step violin, just so you know. So. Yeah. Just, you know, it's it used to frustrate me. Mm-hmm. It used to really get me aggravated to watch these people that felt like, oh, I got that, and have that attitude. Oh, I got that, you know, whatever. You know, shrug it off as if it's not a big deal. And it'd be like, man, you know, honestly, you don't. You know, I can see it, and I'm not that good. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But then I came to a point, and I said, you know what? That's just where they're at. That's what karate is for them, and that's what karate will always be to them until they decide to make a difference or change. Yeah. And that's, you know, that was another part of like progression in your own karate, is like accepting that some people, they're happy where they're at. They're happy and content that that's what they're doing because they feel like that's it. Yep. Some people are driven to always improve. Mm-hmm. Some people want more out of karate than what other people say of it. Mm-hmm. You know, some people just do karate because they want the pat on the back or the trophies. Mm-hmm. Some people do it because they want to be able to defend themselves. Mm-hmm. Some people want to do it because it's something that resonates with them and it's an art for them. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's something that they'll probably do for the rest of their lives because to them it's interesting to always work on the same old things but in a different way. Yeah. You know? And I always relate it to, like, I'm amazed by some of these pencil drawings with the shading and everything that they can make some of these drawings of like pictures, black and white pictures. Mm-hmm. There's people are so good at it. And I'm amazed at it because I can't draw a stick figure. Mm. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't have that ability. Mm. And I feel like, you know, not to be cocky, but I feel like our karate compared to someone, let's say, who's just a brand new shodan, there's a difference there. Well, duh.
Right? There's shadowing and whatever.
I haven't been a shodan for like 15, 16 years, so.
Right. But that's us. That's us being driven to be different. Uh-huh. You know, yeah. I mean, there's only so many kicks and punches that we do in Shotokan. There's only so many techniques. Mm-hmm. And then, so why are we training for 20 plus years? Mm-hmm. Why are there guys training for 50 plus years? Mm-hmm. And the answer is it's the person that is on that path.
I can understand that.
You know what I'm saying?
But kind of as a counter argument, from the perspective of an instructor, I feel like it's super important that an instructor goes by that basic structured fundamental idea and has these progressions, because even though like there are people who are not going to necessarily adhere to that, you have to have a basic framework for someone. So you may be that type of person as an instructor where you're like, well, I just am doing this for fun and it's whatever and it's like this art form. But I do think that if you want to be a good quality instructor and bring up good quality students and provide ample opportunity for them to make their own decisions, you have to have a basic framework to start from.
And the beautiful thing about our art is that there's a freedom to choose to do and teach as the instructor sees fit.
Well, I don't agree.
That's fine. I don't. I agree with you more than not, but I'm also not. I don't like the if you're not with us, you're against us kind of.
Well, the thing is like
sometimes.
I mean, even looking from a progressive like
Absolutely.
fundamentals idea, like that could look totally different per dojo. But I'm saying you have to have a framework. And I don't think there's any way to get around that. I think everybody has some. So I'm not even sure this is an argument worth making. But you have to have something that your students have to adhere to.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was obvious for a long time that there's certain dojos that adhere to strict form.
Yeah.
And that the form and shape is more important than anything else. Mm-hmm. And then there's some dojos that adhere to strict movement. That the movement of either the technique within the stance or in this movement of the stance or techniques is really important.
I would say there's probably fewer of those than the form
yes,
ones.
there probably is.
Yeah.
But they're still out there. Mm-hmm. I mean, in Japan, we've worked more on what was in between the techniques than the actual technique itself, the actual form ending. Mm-hmm. You know, form ending technique stuff stopped when we got to 8th kyu. Mm-hmm. You were supposed to know what a front stance was, and if you didn't do it, you were corrected, but not like, oh, get it, Johnny, you should bend your front knee
right,
more.
It was expected like you had
This
to
is
have it.
exactly what it is. Mm-hmm. You don't get this, you can't even do that, then you don't really deserve the position you're in now. Mm-hmm. You're never going to test to the next level because there's other things you got to cover.
And honestly, I get that. Because if it was another art, or like, I'm not saying another martial art necessarily, but if it was another type of art form, I think in a lot of ways, that's exactly what would happen.
Right. So there's two schools of thought, and you got to respect both of them. And for me, you know, my form might not be the greatest at times, but I feel like I focus on movement more just because that's where the cat's meow is. You know, that's where the magic happens.
I think it's all the same. Just form is just an idea of like a pathway or like a shape. You can have shape to your movement. But I think we've already talked about this.
We have.
Anyhow. Okay. So
I think we got a little bit off at the end there.
I think we did. But practice your fundamentals or we'll smack you with the stick.
Yeah, basics.
Yes, basics. Grasshopper.
Kihon.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Okay, so what you working on?
You know what? This is probably the first time in all of our podcasts I'm actually working on a Steve Ubel combo. And he'll never claim it as his combo.
I'm not sure if that's... You may have done one before. Go ahead. I'm trying to think back.
Dude, you're such a Nazi about things, man.
I know. It's just,
if I mispronounce a word, you laugh, and you're like, that's not how you say it. Or if I do
it's cool, man.
Grammar Nazi, kata Nazi.
I'm super good at fundamental stuff.
Accuracy Nazi. If I make the claim that I never did something beyond basics, you're like, no, I think you've done it. No, remember that podcast in 2017?
I can remember the exact date, too.
Date, time, and within the dang podcast?
You think I'm autistic? Probably not. Go ahead.
Probably. You're definitely in the spectrum.
I don't think so.
You're in the beautiful spectrum.
I don't think so. Thank you. The rainbow spectrum. Go ahead.
But
hey, just we're picking on autistic, but we have like some dope ass autistic people in our dojo.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, actually.
That are really good karateka, by the way, and they practice fundamentals like it ain't nobody's business.
Yeah,
so
dude,
I keep looking at the camera like it's on. Yeah. It's not on.
dude, it's inspiring. We are inspired by our autistic spectrum students because they get it.
Dude,
you know, they get it.
And like I had an idea the other day, or getting off topic again, to have an interview with one of those students when they reach black belt, and it's not going to be very long of an interview because they can't really hold a conversation. But some of our students, like when we work with autistic students in particular, we have to like be so specific with the instructions. So it's all fundamentals with them, but their karate is amazing. So anyway,
exactly.
Go ahead.
But anyways, I'm working on the jab. Lead leg slide forward, jab, lead leg slide back, down block simultaneously, stepping forward, punch. Mm-hmm. Just the footwork, the timing, the posture. I mean, it can be done if you do it segmented or poorly timed or coordinated or, you know, just all kind of crappish. But if you try to do it the way Steve intended it to be done, and what he tries to get across in the seminars he teaches when he does that drill, it's very difficult. It's complex until you get it. Mm-hmm. And that's Steve's kata anyway.
He says get it as if we've gotten it.
Yeah, no, I am nowhere near what I should be doing there. But it's But it's what he says. He said it all the time. Because once you get it, you'll realize how much of it is, how easy it actually is. Mm-hmm. And I believe him. Mm-hmm. You know, he never really had a reason to lie to us. So
yeah,
that's what I'm working on right now.
That combo opened my eyes to the front foot shift back thing. Like, we used to do that when I was a brown belt. We would actually do, I don't even know if cutting kick is a real thing, but that's what my mentor called it. Where it's like a front kick, roundhouse kick combo like thing, because your kick goes at like 45 degrees up. Anyway, but we would do front foot shift back, but we would come all the way back and then switch feet. So that was our practice with it. And obviously, like, it looked awful whenever we did it. But that was the first time I'd seen it. Second time I ever saw it was when Steve did that, where he was like pulling the front foot part of the way back, but not actually moving the stance until it was time to step in, which I was just like, oh my God, how did he do that?
Yeah, controlling that front knee, moving the foot without moving the knee.
Right, but that was the first time I'd ever seen that. But it's amazing. Somehow we're just like, we're working on the same thing right now.
Yeah, it's a couples thing.
How did that happen?
I mean,
I wonder where that came from. Where'd you get the idea from?
It was an epiphany.
Was it an epiphany? You just decided, you know what, I think I'm going to work on this.
Yeah, I think I'm going to work on it.
Yeah, okay. So, just
what
so happens that I'm working on the same thing.
Where'd you get that idea from?
Actually, I came up with it because my knee is hurting and I'm trying to not do kata as much right now. Oh. So it feels better. So, yeah, amazing how that works. But yeah, I am working on actively driving off that back leg and not being so... Like, I think I'm a little bit better about thinking about the back leg as being, like, the structure, like, the controlling leg. Like, that took a while to understand. Like, conceptually I have it. I don't always do it. But particularly in this technique, because now you have the front foot moving, it's really important that your back leg is not just supporting, but as Steve said, it should be driving the technique, even though your front foot is moving. So trying to get that down for the moment. I worked so much on, like, pelvic control stuff, and it wasn't awful when I was doing it, so that's good. What?
I'm just listening.
Oh, you're like blinking at me like, yes it was, that sucked. Blink, 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 Morse code. But that wasn't awful, so that was really rewarding, because that's been like, what year is this? It's been 6 years of basically consistent pelvic control work. Trying to not let my hips go all over the place when I move. So
yeah. But we've been improving.
Yeah.
Just not there yet.
Yeah. Okay.
Yay.
Well, this has been real. Thanks for chilling out with us, guys.
I'm just going to point out that both of us looked up to the camera when
we both looked at it like it was going to be looking at us, but it ain't looking. It was charged, so I don't know what's up with this battery, but anyhow.
Yeah. All right.
All right, guys. Bye.
Bye.